Okay, guys, last video here for lesson 16. It's a long one. We are now going to put all of our tools to use. We've got 6 quadratics here and we're going to solve them. You can use whatever strategies you want, and you want to be efficient. You don't want to do a process that's harder or requires more work than you need to do, or requires more steps than you need to complete. So you'll notice this first one is, hopefully, you don't need to complete the square for this. You don't need to do the quadratic formula. You can either reason your way through it, or to get x alone, you're going to take the square root of both sides, right? I'll think about this mentally. What numbers can I put in here that will square to make 100? And remember, think about it visually. Here's x squared. It's going to run into 100 2 times. Hopefully you know that. So we've got positive 10 and negative 10, because 10 times 10, or 10 squared, is 100, and negative 10 squared is 100. Okay, the procedures behind that are square root, square root. Since this is x squared, right? I'm going to show this up here. You're actually going to consider the positive and the negative square root of 100, because I know those two answers are going to get plugged back in here and squared, so the negative answer will be okay. Okay? You could go to Desmos and check. You could type x squared in, and then you could type 100 in, and you'll see that that's where they run into each other. All right, the second one looks almost the same as number one, right? We could try to do this mentally. What number squared makes 38? Well, I don't know about you, but I don't know what that number is. Okay, because I know 6 times 6 is 36, and then 7 times 7 is 49. So it's somewhere between like 6 and 7. So since it's not an exact number, we're going to have to leave it as a radical. So square root, x equals either the positive or the negative square root of 38. And you can write them out separately if you want. So that's x equals the positive square root of 38 and negative. And I'm going to leave them in radical form because they don't come out as an exact number. All right, now here comes our tools. We've got completing the square or the quadratic formula. If you start to recognize the pattern, completing the square is probably going to save you time and work. How do you know if it's one of those perfect square problems? Make your box and check. I'm going to go over here and see if this is a perfect square. So if I put x squared right here, and if I split negative 10 in half, I get negative 5x and negative 5x. So that's x, negative 5, negative 5. If this is already a perfect square, this number should be 25. Yes, it is. I don't even have to do anything to this. I can rewrite this problem as x minus 5 times x minus 5, or x minus 5 squared. So this whole left-hand side, instead of writing it like that, I'm going to write it like that. So now I'm trying to find out, when does that equal 0? I can do the math to get this figured out. I'm trying to get x alone. It's being squared. So I'm going to take the square root. Whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. X minus 5 equals, the square root of 0 only has one answer, 0. Add 5 to both sides. This problem only has one answer. We haven't run into that very often, but I want to kind of show you without going to Desmos what it looks like. You could go to Desmos if you want. That problem would be over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It would touch once like this. So it only happens to cross 0. Here's 0. See how it only touches it one time at the number 5. That's a possibility. Okay. Touch twice up here. When in doubt, go to Desmos and get a visual. And let's be honest, these first three, I mean, you could go to Desmos and do this one. You could go to Desmos and do this. You wouldn't be able to write the decimal answer. You'd have to know to write it in radical form. And this one, technically, you could go to Desmos and type that whole thing in and look when it touches 0, and you would see it touches at 5. Okay? All right, the fourth problem. Let's see if this one is already a perfect square. So I've got x squared. I'm going to split the 14 in half. I get 7 and 7. X, 7, 7. This would need to be 49 because 7 times 7 is 49. If this was 49, I could rewrite this as x plus 7 squared. Uh-oh, it's only 40. But I can change that. I can turn that into a 49. I'm going to add 9. I'm allowed to do whatever I want to one side as long as I do it to the other. So now watch, I have x squared plus 14x plus 49 equals 9. Yay, look it, I have turned this problem into this box. Why is that so great? Because now I can rewrite this instead of that quadratic that way. I can rewrite it as x plus 7 times x plus 7, which is x plus 7 squared, equals, this time there's not a 0 over here, is a 9. How come? Because I added 9 over there. How do you solve this problem? Well, I need to get rid of the square, so I take the square root. Since this is x to the second power, I'm going to be looking for the numbers, right? A lot of you missed this on the last quiz, right? What numbers can square to make 9? This either needs to be positive 3, that's the positive square root of 9, or it needs to be negative 3. I'm going to write that out. It could be the positive or the negative square root of 9, which is 3 or negative 3. So now we solve this real quick. By minus 7, one of the answers is 4. If I subtract 7, one of the answers is negative 10. Now, you could check your work right here. You could go back to the original problem. If you put a 4 right here and do the math, it'll equal 0. You could also go to Desmos. You could type this in, and that's where it would cross. Okay? Now, instead of doing completing the square again, I want to make sure that I model doing the quadratic formula. By the way, you can do the quadratic formula on 3 and 4 if you want. You're welcome to. Okay? It seems like it's easier, but a lot of students make tiny errors. So if you're going to use it, pay attention to detail. So for 5 and 6, I'm going to do the quadratic formula. So when you're doing the quadratic formula, the first thing you need to do is identify your A, B, and C to use in the formula. A is the number in front of x squared, so it's 1. B is the number in front of x, so for this one it's 14. And C is the constant, which is 39. And by the way, you cannot identify these if that doesn't say 0. If there's a number over here, move it over before you figure out what these are. Okay, now I'm going to go do the work over here. And you can look on your other page for the formula if you need to. Well, I'll write it out. The quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. Okay, so now all we have to do is plug everything in. X equals the negative of b. My b is 14. That says to take the negative of it. Plus or minus b squared. 14 times 14 is 196 times 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 39, all over 2a. Here's where students start making mistakes. Listen closely. Do not type that square root symbol into your calculator. Just type the numbers and this in. Okay? Tell yourself, type into calc. And you can get it ready right like this. Look, x equals negative 14 plus or minus. Get your square root symbol ready. 2 times 1 is 2. Whatever you get from typing this stuff that I just highlighted, that's what's going to be left under the radical. Okay? We're not doing the square root. We don't know if we can do it yet. Because if it isn't one of those numbers that has a whole number square root, we have to leave it. So here we go. 196 minus 4 times A times C. Boom. 40. Does 40 have a whole number square root? No, I mean, you can check right here. Look, square root of 40. No, disgusting. Nope. So you're leaving it. Now, you got to break your answers apart. This has two answers, and we need to clean this up. So look, 14 is being divided by 2, and the square root of 40 is being divided by 2. You can divide 14 by 2. You cannot divide square root of 40 by 2. So you're going to write it like this. X equals, this becomes -7 plus the square root of 40 over 2. And then you also have -7 minus the square root of 40 over 2. Those are your two answers. Okay? If this seems overwhelming, we're going to be practicing this for, next week as well. You're just identifying A, B, and C, plugging them into the formula, and understanding how you go about simplifying. If you wanted to make sure you were right, you could figure out what this is as a decimal, approximately, and go back to Desmos and type this in and see if it's crossing at whatever you got for this decimal, right? You can't write your answer as a decimal. You can use Desmos to check though. All right, last one. Now this last one, I would definitely do the quadratic formula on. If there's a number in front of x squared, completing the square is a nightmare. I didn't even show you those. So if x squared has a 1 in front, like 3, 4, and 5, completing the square or the quadratic formula are, good choices. I mean, 3, doing the quadratic formula would have been a lot more work, but yeah, it could be done. Okay, so for number 6, we're going to do the same thing that we did for number 5. A is 3, B is -5, and C is -11. Here we go. X equals -B. Well, my B is already negative. So the negative of a negative is positive plus or minus the square root B squared. By the way, this will always end up being a positive because even if that's negative, -5 squared is positive 25. Just don't type it into your calculator wrong, okay? This should never be a negative number right here. So B squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2A. Crucial. Next thing you do is you only type this into your calculator. Nothing else, not the square root symbol, not the 5, nothing. X equals, I'm going to get it ready, 5 plus or minus, and you can go ahead and do the bottom right now. 2 times 3 is 6. What do I get when I type that yellow line into my calculator? I mean, you could try to do that in your head. You have to do 25 minus whatever you get from multiplying those. I'm just going to use a calculator. 25 minus 4 times 3 times -11. 157. Does 157 have a square root? No. So you're leaving it. Okay, now we need to write our final answers. It's 5 plus this guy divided by 6 and 5 minus this guy divided by 6. Now let's make sure we can't clean it up. 5 divided by 6? That doesn't clean up, so I'm just going to leave it. So here we go. How do we write our two answers? Like the last one, 14 divided by 2 made 7. And then I just left that part after both. But this one, 5 divided by 6 plus the square root of 157 over 6 and 5 over 6 minus the square root of 157 over 6. Okay? You will have lots of opportunities to practice these in the homework problems today, and next week I will be happy to go over any of these if you get stuck. Please watch the video of the homework problems and check with the key to make sure that you are getting these right. I hope you have a great day.